All right, this is the Big Douglas Show. Rapper Big Pooh is in the co-host chair, and our guest today from the Washington Post is Sam Fortier. Sam, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's been a crazy draft season with speculation, with rumors, with everything flying around. So I'm pretty happy that we're about to get down to it.
Pooh, Sam might been like the fifth guest I ever had on the show, and then he came back. Sam, I don't know if you remember this or not, but he came on the show. He called in from Phoenix. He got off the plane. I guess it was a nice walk. It was during COVID, so I don't think people were taking cabs. Just strolling down the sidewalk, talking to me about the football game coming up. So, Sam,
Nice.
we always appreciate your time here on the show.
Of course, I appreciate you guys having me.
They signed Eric Flowers. Let's do a couple of things before we get to the draft. I mean, that's obviously what we're here for. But they signed Eric Flowers today. And at 9 million, I figured he was the preemptive starter. At 3 million, we're back to a competition. Let's twofold question here. What does that mean they think of Sadiq Charles? And what does this mean about Sheriff and a possible trade going forward?
Yeah, I think when I think about what this trade means, you're right. I think that reduced salary certainly minimizes the risk for Washington. Swap of late round picks. You get a guy that not only revived his career in Washington, but comes in under a new coaching staff, of course. But that coaching staff really liked him in Carolina. They sent offensive line coach John Matsko out to visit with him pre-draft. I believe it was 2015, 2014 maybe, to kind of go have dinner with him. So, I mean, this staff believes in him. I think this is more of a reflection on, I would say, on Wes Schweitzer, the starting left guard from last season. Obviously, Wes Martin didn't work out. They benched him, I think, in week 5. But to me, I think Sadiq Charles, what you drafted him for is to be your left tackle. And obviously, he'll probably be able to play left guard or right guard if need be. I think this does give them flexibility. Maybe they do trade Brandon Sheriff. But when you trade it'd be really tough, I think, trade a franchise guy like that, a top 6 pick, a guy who's been with your franchise for so long, all pro. It'd still be difficult to trade him, but this does give you the depth, whether it's, moving Flowers or Schweitzer or where you put Charles. I just think it gives you more flexibility, and especially at an inexpensive price, it's kind of like, why not?
I've read a report today that, well, you can't really believe anything right now, but I read a report today that Washington apparently is enamored with a player that they're willing to move up for that's not a quarterback. What do you have any insight into, not necessarily who they're targeting, but if those rumors are indeed kind of true?
Yeah, I think it's tough to say, right? Because the draft season is lying season. But I think another thing is, like, when we talk about enamored, or the reports that are, comes out like, Washington loves this player. Like we've heard that about Davis Mills, right? Or we've heard that about Micah Parsons, the linebacker out of Penn State. And to me, it's like, well, what does that mean? Have they been calling more, checking up on him? Have they been, using their 5 Zooms that they had with him? Because I do think, teams always like players at certain values, right? Like when I think back, not to bring up Tom Brady, whom I know is a polarizing figure, but like, I think the people misunderstand that lesson. Because to me, it was the Patriots thought he should have been a 3rd round pick, and they picked him in the 6th round just because they thought he was such good value. So Washington might love Micah Parsons, but like, is the value there to go up and get him at 13, at 14, or would they be reticent to do so unless he fell to 19? So to directly answer your question, like, certainly that Washington loves a lot of players. I think they love a lot of non-quarterbacks, and might they be willing to go up and get him if they think that guy is a Sam or a Will linebacker you can plug and play for the next 4 to 5 years, like a Micah Parsons or like a Jeremiah Owusu Kamara. Like, maybe those are the type of guys they're talking about, but I think it's just all about value. And I think it will be hard to trade up this year, certainly because of the way San Francisco set the market by going from 12 to 3 and giving up a future 1st and a 3rd. I mean, that just sets the market at a really high price. So you got to be thinking to yourself, what is going to be worth it? And I just, I have a hard time seeing it, but at the same time, things change on draft night.
This is year 2 with Rivera, and certainly you guys don't get nearly the access that you're used to. How have you found it trying to navigate the new front office, particularly since two of the members are brand new, trying to figure out what it is they like to do? Because let's face it, even last year in the first round, everybody knew what the pick was the day the season ended. So, how have you guys found getting to know this new coaching or front office staff?
Yeah, and I would say even, beyond Martin Mayhew and Marty Herney, Chris Polian, he's new
Right.
as well. There's a lot of new pieces. And to me, getting to know them has been tough. We really haven't talked to anyone besides Mayhew twice and Herney once. And I think that's by design. Ron Rivera is the one voice, as Dan Snyder would say, of this team. And I think that that to me is the biggest question of this draft. To me, it matters less of, do you move up? Unless you trade up for a quarterback, I think the personnel moves that are going to be made in the draft are less important than how they get made. Ron Rivera has said he will listen to his front office in terms of Mayhew and Herney and Polian and Stokes and all those guys. But it's very easy to say that to us in a press conference, but it's hard to do it on draft night when you got one half of the room that wants one guy and one half of the room wants the other guy. Can Ron Rivera balance those? Can he balance those voices? Can he have a good process behind these decisions? You can weather misses in the draft, but if your process is broken, I think or if your process doesn't go as well as you think it will or you hope it will, that's a much bigger concern to me. So even beyond our relationships, it is harder to get to know these guys, right? Because we just don't see them. Ron Rivera is by design that one guy that's putting information out, or ideally he wants to be the one putting information out for this organization. Not only is it harder to get to know them, but I do think it's harder maybe to understand their dynamics, and that to me, their dynamics, how they arrive at these decisions that they're going to make over the next days in the draft, that's the most important thing.
I always wondered, for persons covering the team last year and this year, and if they covered the team a year or two prior, how has the drastic change for y'all, like having leaks, all types of information leaking out, to now you get nothing? It's almost impossible to get any information. Not only have you not had the access to the front office and the coaching staff due to COVID, but now you don't even get those leaks anymore. Like, how has that been for you guys?
Well, I think there's always, ways to find out information. And last year was my first year covering the Washington football team. So, but before that, I did cover the LA Chargers. So I certainly have been around the NFL and kind of can speak to kind of the culture of information. I think there's always different ways in, right? Like, even though you don't have direct access maybe to coaches and other people, I think there's always people who understand what's going on and can kind of give you a better clue. I think if you go back and look at the Dwayne Haskins situation when that initially happened, I think, there are ways to find out, okay, Ron said that he wanted to pursue the division title and he wanted to, kind of prioritize experience. And that's why they went with Kyle. But, if you dig in and you talk to enough people that you find out maybe Dwayne wasn't working as hard as people would have hoped. And I don't mean to focus on Dwayne or disparage Dwayne here, but basically it's there are certainly fewer leaks from the building, especially with the new staff, especially with a coach that wants to kind of solidify his place and kind of set the status quo. But there's always ways, I think, to find out the information that helps fans understand, hey, this is the reality of what's going on, maybe behind closed doors.
I'm curious, Sam. I think a lot of fans were thinking that left tackle at 19 was maybe like a real big need, but if you're suggesting maybe that, I was thinking they gave Charles his snaps at left guard and that's where they saw him, but you're suggesting they hope at least he can play left tackle. Do you think that will affect the way they draft in the first round?
I do think they have candidates at left tackle. Whether or not Jon Christian showed enough to get a second chance, I think Cornelius Lucas was obviously a pleasant surprise. I think you could probably roll with him at stopgap. I do think they drafted Sadiq Charles with the idea that he would play left tackle. I think you had to give Jon Christian a chance to show what he could do. But you know what Cornelius Lucas is, and you don't know what Sadiq is, because Ron has talked about those 2 snaps he played against the Giants. he liked those two snaps, but obviously that's just not a large enough sample size to bank on a guy. So I think it's all about value. You know, if Christian Darrisaw is there at 19, maybe that's the pick. Maybe you like someone else. Maybe you want to go interior with the kid out of USC, Vieira Tucker. You know, I think it's all about value at 19. They do need to get better on the offensive line, but I think the thing that I say when I say I do think Sadiq Charles is going to get a chance at left tackle, and I do believe that strongly, is that they just want to get better on the line, period. And however that presents itself, first round, second round, guard, tackle, I think that's what they want to do. But I don't think it would necessarily have a direct impact on what they do at 19. I don't think they'll overdraft someone just because.
I've been an advocate of if their guy, the guy they absolutely want, isn't there at 19, that they do trade back. You know, not out the first round, but they do trade back. Do you believe there's any chance of that happening?
Yeah, I think it's unlikely, right? Because their two biggest needs, offensive line and off-ball linebacker, they're both pretty deep in this draft. I mean, at 19, definitely those are both in range. But I do think it's possible, and I think that especially when we talk about this draft, there's so much uncertainty, right? Like with the opt-outs, with COVID, with everything, you know, no combine. This draft is going to be unique because last year, you know, early COVID draft, you had all the tape, you had all the measurables that you needed. I think teams, there's going to be a lot, you know, people are saying there's a lot of variance on these boards. There's not a list of like 40, 50 guys you'd expect to go in the first round this year. It's much larger. Teams are much further apart. And so I think you are going to see the higher propensity to trade down, especially trade for next year's picks when you're going to have a better chance of theoretically a deeper class as well, with all those kids who got extra waivers who are going to come out. So I think a lot of teams are going to want to trade down, but what's that market? If a lot of teams are trying to trade down, maybe it actually becomes inefficient to trade down. So yes, I see it's possible they could trade down. I think it's unlikely considering everything else at play. But if they did, I mean, and they get some extra picks, I think like when you look at historical studies of the draft, more bites at the apple is never a bad thing.
Real quick, a follow-up on that one. What do you think is more likely than a trade up or a trade down?
I think it's likelier that they trade up. And when I say that, I mean, I think it's likelier that the quarterback they like could fall. They could try to go up and get him, whether that be Trey Lance, whether that be Justin Fields or whomever. And I think that's likelier. It's likelier that they trade up, but I wouldn't be surprised by a trade down is probably the best way to put that.
I have long been on the Jeremy Reeves train. Now I know that Morg from TCU is starting to get more and more buzz as the pick at 19. Where does the coaching staff stand on Reeves, and do you think they're looking for a replacement?
Yeah, that's a good question. We know that Chris Harris likes Jeremy Reeves just because of, you know, the latitude he got in those last 3 games, you know, those 3 starts down the stretch. I think it says something that they didn't go to him right away. They went to DeShazer or Everett, I think probably because, you know, he's a guy that's been in this system. You know, he's been here for 3 years, even though he's primarily a strong. They thought, okay, you know, when we're going to bench Apke, we're going to go to DeShazer. So, you know, it's I think that illustrates that they might not love Jeremy Reeves. But I mean, I think he played well down the stretch, and I think he at least earned a chance to compete for the job in camp. So to me, it's like he gives you a decent floor, but they probably want that ceiling to be higher. So I think that they would upgrade if they had the chance.
So I'm gonna get to my guy in a second. I know Doug know who I'm talking about as soon as I say the position group. But I've watched this offseason and I've seen Washington not do much at the tight end position. And I know they're not, obviously Kyle Pitts is the guy in the first round, but after that, are they going to be targeting tight end in this draft? Because right now I believe they just have Logan Thomas and Bauer on the roster. Ball. Yeah, okay, I'm screwing his name all up. Ball on the roster. They have to be targeting the tight end. They have to have a pretty good idea of who they're looking at in the later rounds, you think?
Yeah, I'm hesitant to say this, right? Because I thought last draft they had to go get a tight end because they had only signed Logan Thomas, right? Like, I'm a little bit wary to say they need him, but I do agree with you. Like, when you look at tight end snaps across the league, the only guy who really was two-way, blocking and pass catching and playing as many snaps as Logan Thomas, 93%, was Travis Kelce. And he wasn't taking as many body blows because they would line them all up over the formation, right? So to me, Logan Thomas is going to be 30 this year. Your usage of him is crazy high. You can't bank on Marcus Baugh taking the leap that Logan Thomas did. So yes, I think that they should, maybe go out and get a tight end, but I'm sure like tight ends coach Pete Hainer is like, Sammis Reyes started playing football 2 months ago. I can have this guy looking pretty good in no time. But no, I'm kidding. You can't rely on him, I think, to be a legitimate role player this year. So when I think about tight ends, you're not going to get Kyle Pitts, as you said. But the two guys I look at maybe second, third, fourth round, earlier side, Pat Fryermuth out of Penn State. That's a name that sticks out to me. And Hunter Long out of Boston College. Those two guys, inline receiver threats, guys that could maybe stretch the field a little bit, do some good things in that Air Coryell-based offense Scott Turner runs. But neither of those guys are super impressive. It's not a strong tight end class. So while I agree with you, it seems like they got to do something. As we know from the past, that doesn't necessarily mean they feel like they have to do something.
Gotcha. Nobody likes mentioning my guy, Tommy Tremble. Yeah, he has loads of untapped potential. I'm telling people he's going to be, I'm not saying he's going to be a Gronkowski, but he's going to be better in the pro game than he was in the college game. That's all I'm saying.
Sam, the defense played a ton of 4-2-5 last year with safeties on the field. It's kind of why we got some Cam Curl action, right? Because they were playing him. So I guess I'm trying to get to what most people want to know now, which is what are we doing with the safeties strong side if Landon Collins comes back to full health? Will it just be more 4-2-5? And I guess the follow-up on that is where is Holcomb at? Because then you really only need two linebackers.
Yeah, so I think let me start with the safeties first. The strong safety position, as you pointed out, you have a logjam there with Cam Curl and a healthy Landon Collins. And I like what Louis Riddick said earlier this offseason to my colleague Nikki Javala. He said Cam Curl did nothing last season where you say he can't be on the field. That guy has to play. He has to be out there. And so when you start talking about Landon Collins, yes, he's got a huge cap hit, excuse me. You've got to keep him on the field, right? So does he move down to linebacker? And we know, Landon Collins posts on Instagram, it's not happening, my guy, his move to linebacker. But Ron Rivera, when asked, was Landon speaking for the team or was he speaking for Landon? He said that was Landon. So I think we could see Landon Collins move to linebacker. I don't think it's happening for sure. I think the timing of his rehab is going to affect this. If he gets back in time for training camp, say, do you give him a chance to compete for that starting safety job, or do you, make it more of a 50-50, or do you automatically transition him down? Versus if he comes back in week 4, per se, if Cam Curl's solidified there, it's a real tough ask to say, hey, this defense, if it's playing well, to kind of shake things up. So then, Landon's put at a disadvantage. So I think it depends on his recovery. And it depends on how things look in camp. At linebacker, to me, it was notable that Ron Rivera in his pre-draft press conference said that they're still planning on using those three linebackers, right? The Mike, Sam, and Will. And he pointed out, I think John Bostic is expected to be the Mike. And then he said, basically, Cole can play Sam or Will being a little bit more downhill, Sam being a little bit more coverage. And so he said that flexibility gives them flexibility in the draft to say, oh, okay, Zaven Collins is more of a Will, so we can take him at 19, or Jeremiah Owusu-Kamara is more of a Sam, we can take him. So he was emphasizing the flexibility of that roster now, gives them obviously a little bit more leeway in the draft, because you're right. When they play that 4-2-5, when they go two linebackers, if you have a guy like Cam Curl or you have a guy like Cole Holcomb, where you say, okay, he can maybe even play that nickel. Not that Cole would play that nickel, but in certain sub packages, he could be a defensive back. I think that's what you'd like to do, and you'd like to give yourself that flexibility. So that's why I think Jeremiah Owusu-Kamara makes so much sense. is because if you go 4-2-5, or if you're in base, Owusu Kamara could play slot corner, or he could play that outside linebacker like he did at Notre Dame. He's a little bit smaller, 6'1", 220, but I think that positional flexibility, especially in today's NFL, especially against modern tight ends, this is an original take. This is not an original take, but it makes a ton of sense to me.
I'm interested, after the draft, after, the roster shakes out, what is the expectations for this franchise for Ron Rivera's second season? Is it, I think they were altered a little bit with the win of the division and the showing in the playoffs, but is with year two, is this more of a 8-8 well, it's not 8-8 now with the extra game, but is this more like a close to 500 field team, or is there expectations to say, no, we want the division again? Like, where is the expectations for this team currently?
Yeah, and I would be curious to know what you guys think, to be honest, about that, because to me, and to that coaching staff, obviously winning every game, winning the division, that's the expectation every year. That's the culture that Ron Rivera wants to instill. But I think when you look at last year, not only in their record, but also in how the division played out, you got to view last year as, in my opinion, as a happy, pop off, a surprise. This playoff game gave them a lot of good experience, especially against Tom Brady and the Bucs. And giving them a good game was nice, but that's experience. That's seasoning for your team when you get them where you want to go. Because until they have a franchise quarterback, I don't think you can expect them to be a serious contender for anything beyond, a division title like it was last year. So to me, especially, you're playing all division winners from last year, your schedule is going to be really tough. I think around 500 is where you want to be. Getting a big marquee upset win over a New Orleans, over a Buffalo, over some of those, those bigger time teams that you're playing now, like being close in every game. I think that's the expectation. But at the end of the year, about 500, considering everything, is probably where I'd expect them to be. But again, I'd be curious to hear your guys' thoughts, because I think what the fan base thinks of this coming year is going to be a real key into understanding how their actual performance is kind of dictates whether the fan base maybe buys a little bit more back in, or whether it's seen as a disappointment.
For me, I'm around 500. I still look at this as year two in a rebuild, in like a 3-year rebuild. I believe the defense is going to be top 10 again, even better than last year. The question mark falls on the offense. First, are we going to get Ryan Fitzpatrick or Ryan Fitzmagic? That's always, and then for how long? Because he doesn't normally sustain for a year, a full season. And then just how the offensive line shakes out, how much Antonio Gibson has improved, the tight end, how does the wide receiver, how does Scott Turner look in his second year as coordinator? So I'm thinking around 500-ish, in that range. Like I said, for me, this is still year two of the rebuild. We're in a division where nobody wanted to win the division last year. Somebody had to win it, and we ended up being the team that won it. But there's still a rebuild happening. This is still a young team for the most part. And, now they have a different front office to go with the different coaching staff that they had last season. So I'm still, like I said, I'm still looking at this as year two of a 3-year rebuild. So around 500 is where I expect them to be.
Yeah, 9-8 seems right. 9-8. I mean, Fitzpatrick was going to take Miami to the playoffs last year if they didn't yank him for 2. I mean, that's kind of how he is. So you put what was the defense last year? Top 10 to get into the top 5. You have a premier wide receiver. But you make a great point. Antonio Gibson was learning on the fly how to play running back. I mean, you saw him. They couldn't hit holes. And what I think is amazing, the coaching staff job they did. I think we had Evan Silva on a month and a half ago who said the league didn't even think that J.D. McKissick was going to get picked up. Like that he was just going to be out on the street. And he was fantastic last year. And so, yeah, if the line plays well, I don't see why 9-8 isn't realistic. The Eagles, I can't imagine are going to be very good. I don't really know what to expect with the Giants. And I mean, if the Cowboys are going to give up 40 points a game, then, good on them.
They're definitely going to be giving up 40 points
Yeah.
again.
Sam, what's going on with the Jon Allen extension?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that we obviously we haven't seen any concrete talks, or any reports about where they're at. I think, when you're talking about Jon Allen, you gotta think, one, how is my payment of the, if you're in the front office, how does our contract with Jon Allen line us up to sign Montez Sweat in 2024 and Chase Young in 2025?
Let me cut you off real quick, just because I heard what happened there, and I just want to make sure. You said that because at some point they have to trade Deron Payne, right? Jon Allen's the one they'll keep. Deron Payne will be the one that's let go. Is that your thought on that? Because there's no way they can pay all four of them.
Yeah, there's no way they can pay all four. I don't know if you need to trade one per se. I mean, it's impossible to keep all four. I think it's probably impossible to keep the two interior guys if you want to keep the two edge rushers, unless Payne or Allen takes I think what would for them would probably be a below market deal. We're talking 10, 11, 12 million dollars, in APY. I think both those guys would want more than that. I think they see themselves as premier interior rushers, especially in
Leonard Williams just got 19, right?
Right, exactly. So, I mean, you're asking those guys to take below market value, and I don't think they'd want to do that. So, unless one of them compromises and gets maybe a little bit like longer term or more guarantees or things of that nature, I would expect neither of those guys. Again, it's early, right? Like, we don't really know how this is going to play out. But when I think about Jon Allen, also, like, he was supposed to be a top 5 pick and he fell because of arthritic shoulders. I think that you've got to also weigh in that factor. Can you give that guy a 5-year deal? And I don't mean to disparage Jon Allen, right? Because he's missed one game in 4 years. I mean, that guy has been so reliable, and really a really productive, I think, elite presence in there. But you got to weigh those factors versus the production, versus the roster construction, versus everything else. And so, I'm sure they've talked. I'm sure they've, tested the waters with each other. Okay, Jon Allen probably wants 18 or 19. I'm sure the team wants to pay 11, 12, something like that. Like, it's not. I think it's pretty apparent where both sides are. It's just, is one person going to blink? Is one side going to want to prioritize something else? And until the hand is forced, maybe they franchise tag him next year because they think, there's so many options on the table. It's hard to say exactly what's going to happen, but I think everybody knows where those two sides are at right now.
Is it fair to say that this front office is going to be a tad bit stingier with the wallet? We're seeing, they did chase Roulier, but that wasn't anything crazy. But they're not willing to set the market on players here. You have the Jon Allen standoff, you have the Brian Sheriff standoff. Like, it to me, it's feeling like we want you back, but we're not gonna set new highs in bringing anybody back. Am I wrong in seeing in feeling that way?
I think when you look at this organization's history over the last 20 years, going back to Dion, right, or going to most recently Landon Collins, I think those days of opening the wallet because Dan Snyder is enamored with you is, so far, I think this regime has shown to be a little bit more disciplined with the wallet. So I think that read is probably a correct.
All right, Sam, we've got 1 day left. What is your best guess for what Washington does at 19 tomorrow?
If Washington doesn't move up for a quarterback, and if they don't move down because the players that they like are not available, if they stay at 19, and I'm gonna pretend that some of the top tier guys like Penn State linebacker Micah Parsons are not available. If we're talking about the guys that are expected to be in range, I think Jeremiah Owusu-Kamara or the Notre Dame linebacker or TCU safety Trevon Moehrig. I think those are two guys that would really stand out to me and would really help solidify this defense. And when we talk about, what this defense could be, I think those two guys would go a long way, particularly Owusu-Kamara or Zaven Collins out of Tulsa. I think those three names are circled on my draft sheet on what I would expect them to do at that position.
Sam, we thank you for your time today. I know it's very, very busy for you right now. Let the people know where they can find you and, what you have coming up next.
Of course. I'm on Twitter at Sam4TR, at SAM4TR. And you can always follow the work of myself and my colleague, Nikki Jabvala and Les Carpenter at WashingtonPost.com, Washington football team. We've got a lot of good stuff up there on the pre-draft. We're gonna have a lot of good analysis during the draft as well, talking about how these players fit and what they could do the next day, the next round, depending on where everybody else gets picked up. So appreciate everyone following along.
Yeah, Sam, what do you go be able to get a break after this draft? What's your schedule look like after? Because I know you've been busy here for a while.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have mini camps. We're gonna have everything going on. So, I know the league takes a little bit of a break, June to mid-July, right before camp. So that's probably when I'm gonna take some time. But until then, I'm fascinated to see how this team is gonna build for the fall.
Appreciate you, Sam.
Of course. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Have a good one.